Men, this is something that you need to watch because the world, the people around us, are trying to sedate us, trying to keep us back from achieving our goals and our dreams and what actually we should be doing with our lives. Doing something that's important. Do not fall into the trap of hatred and bigotry and any of those negative emotions. We are stronger than that. We are men, and we are meant to succeed and keep things stable in the world. We are meant to protect and look after women and children and other men.
Okay, so I have a theory. This is the first time I've actually...
Tell me.
It's the first time I've been able to talk about it since I put a name to it, and it wasn't me that put a name to it. It was Vincent Haranam and William Costello. It's Williamson's sedation hypothesis.
Ooh.
So I noticed in one of your papers that you said physical violence is rare, a rare but growing problem. Between 2014 and 2018, reactionary incels killed 50 people across North America and Europe. So that's 50 people too many. Shouldn't have happened. One of them in 2020 or 2021 happened on the south coast of England. Almost all of the killings that you do see when it comes to mass shootings that occur in schools, when it comes to jihadi terrorists that come over, they're almost all, categorized as incels. However, given the hereto unforeseen and unknown levels of sexlessness amongst young men, we definitely should have presumed that we would have had tons and tons more incel killings. Where are all of the killings at?
With 30% of men. What is it? Well, I think it was 28 in 2018. So we're theorizing it's above 30 now, with 30% of men being sexless, at least in the last year, or just entirely sexless. That is pretty wild. So why wouldn't we have a bunch of bombings or mass shooters, school shooters, and that type of thing?
Where are all of the killings at is a question that I've been asking myself, and it is my current bro science belief that men are being sedated out of their status-seeking and sexual frustration behavior with porn and video games. So this is Diana Fleischman's uncanny vulvas theory that she's got about porn, and you can see easily enough what happens with video games. It's a ton. I saw some data the other week that said nearly a third of unemployed men who are between the ages of 18 and 30 are spending their time, spending over 2,000 hours per year playing video games, and of that group, there is a huge number that are on either prescription or recreational drugs while they do it.
It's like when you're playing a video game, and this has happened to me too, certain video games, they suck you in where they feel like they're important. There's some quest or achievement or some mastery of some skill. Maybe you're playing against other people. Like I was huge into League of Legends, and I was just climbing the ladder, and it's like you're trying to master a certain champion in the game or whatever, a certain skill in the game. And it feels awesome. It feels like you're actually accomplishing something. And it took me a while to shift my mindset and be like, wait, so I played this game, let's say League of Legends, for 5 years, and I was climbing the ladder and I got quite high. And then I stopped, and I went on to another game, and it was like, well, what was the point of doing that? What was the point of playing that game for so many hours, so long, and then it's just as soon as I stopped playing, it didn't matter anymore. I guess maybe you could say there's some skills that transfer over, but it really was mainly just a time waster. I mean, I enjoyed playing the game and the achievement, but really in the end, it didn't matter.
If it's true that young male syndrome in 2023 is happening in the same way as it would have done in previously unstable societies where the sex ratio or the mating market gets messed up, all of these young men, why are they not running around graffitiing stuff and pushing over granny? Where are they all? This isn't a call to arms for them to start doing stuff. It is
good. Yep.
It is me saying it's simply not there. The stats straight up are not there. You could have, it could have been diluted down by 1/10, and you would have still seen a significant increase. 2008 to 2018, 8% to 28% of men having no sex in the last year between the ages of 18 and 30, which is that age that would cause this trouble. And that finishes in 2018. Roll COVID on top of that, roll pathogen risk and increased levels of disgust and blah, 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 social anxiety, all of this. I honestly think it could be over 50% of men walking down the street, maybe 40%. If you pointed a man on the street, a 1 in 2 chance that if he's between the ages of 18 and 30, he hasn't had sex in the last year. That is such a huge increase in the state of less than 2 decades. There should be more of these troubles, and there isn't. And it seems that porn use and video game use are the 2 easiest outlets for that camaraderie, status seeking, vasopressin, dopamine behavior, and they're getting some, it's not quite reproductive fitness signals, but it's good enough. It's a titrated dose. Williamson's sedation hypothesis.
Yeah, look, I really like it. I think the sedation word is just such a beautiful term in this one, right? And it actually reminds me of some work that I did with this. So I've done a little bit of work with an evolutionary biologist, Mike Kasumovich, and he has looked at violent video games and how they relate to mate value and whether playing violent video games can give you this kind of boost of make you feel like you're more of a dude, right? Like you're more of a man, you've got higher mate value. And he actually does find effects consistent with that. But then he also finds these things where if you lose a game, particularly if you lose a video game to a woman and you're a guy, you are super unhappy about it. You're like more aggressive, you're more of a jerk. But if you lose to a man, it's not so bad.
Yeah, because if you lose to a girl, you're a little bitch. You're saying a girl beat you in a video game?
And he does a lot of his work on, or a lot of his initial work was actually on spiders and on phenotypic plasticity in spiders and mating dynamics in spiders. But he's a super interesting guy. Now he does some human stuff. And he talks about that people are playing violent video games to practice dominance, right? Because they're having trouble with dominance in the offline world. So maybe they use the online world to practice dominance. And I think that aligns nicely with your kind of hypothesis.
You know what? I would say that's true for me, because when I think about like winning a match, against other people or even against the computer, you feel more confident. You're like, yeah, I did it. You're like, oh yeah, it's like a whole hyped up thing. My whole day changes. The way I interact with those around me, I'm in like a better mood, a more confident mood, and vice versa. If I played, a game and I lost a bunch of times, and I didn't do very well, then my mood is very much the opposite. So I would say that's fair point. It's also part of the reason why I stopped playing League of Legends and the online video games, is because it was too like up and down. It wasn't regulated. Because you lose, 50% of the time, or you win 50% of the time, and it's just like some days were really crappy, and it wasn't good for me being in a relationship to be acting like a crazy lunatic sometimes, just like all like shitty mood because of a video game to like somebody who's in a relationship with me, and I realized that, and I was like, this is dumb. But obviously on the flip side, a really positive mood if you win, but still, let's try to be more even.
I also think, though, it would be simplistic to assume that and I know that you're not doing this, but it would be simplistic for people to think that the only outlet then from that kind of mating disadvantage is societal disruption. So one of the things that has happened over time and over development is our brains have developed. We've found other ways to try and resolve the issues that we face and try and channel those kinds of problems into other ways. So I think that there is that ability as well. How you would go about doing that other than, potentially just complaining to your mates is a really problematic question, right?
You've looked at correlations between local sex ratios and the state of the local mating market and incel activity online, misogynistic tweets, and then that downstream related into domestic violence or domestic abuse and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah. And we do find this correlation between offline and online behaviours there. So one of the things we found was that, again, consistent theme, income inequality increases the likelihood of incel ideology. It makes it more prevalent. And we also find that when the advantage that men hold over women in terms of how much they earn. So that kind of gender inequality effect. When that gap erodes, so when men and women's earnings become closer and closer, there's more incel ideology there as well.
And that's because women want to date men who have more money. And so if the woman is producing all this money and doesn't need a man, then the guys are going to be like, what the shit? What do I do now? And they're going to be feeling depressed and sad about this because the women just aren't interested. And before, you could just work a job and be like, look, I can provide for you. And a woman would be more interested in taking you up on that offer. But now they're like, well, I can provide for myself. I don't want you average dude or below average dude. I want above average guy. I want the guy who's like super good looking or super intelligent or whatever it is, a certain quality. And so average men or below average men are just going to be like, well, what the hell do I do now?
And then in relation to the offline world, one of the things we tracked was the kinds of misogynistic discourse that a lot of incels engage in. And we related that to domestic and family violence outcomes. And we find that there is this predictive relationship where when the social media chatter in a particular region becomes more misogynistic, what you find is that you start to see more domestic and family violence in that area. And you even see this predictive effect as well, where if misogyny increases 1 year, right, next year you'll see more domestic and family violence there as well.
You know, this doesn't surprise me at all, because if I see these comments online from men, like I go on different Reddit boards or even in YouTube comments, and you just see the vitriol and the hatred in these tweets or comments or posts that people are putting. And like, if you are capable of writing that down, what's to stop you from, if you're near somebody, to acting that way and being, letting that anger out? Because clearly it's inside of you. You're writing it down. You're putting it out there online. So now you're in a situation where you're with a woman. She does something that pisses you off because it reminds you of all the black pill or red pill stuff that happened, that people talk about online. And then all of a sudden, you just get taken back to all that crap that you threw out online or you read other people saying out online, and it makes you get even more upset and you act out in your anger. If you're somebody who's capable of controlling yourself, you don't go online and start talking a bunch of hatred towards women or men or whatever. If you're like a normal person, if you're capable of controlling your emotions and things, obviously you don't do that. So clearly the people who are doing that are not normal people. And now they're out there in the world spreading this hate and meeting other people who are also hateful. And then it just perpetuates on itself and they get these bubbles, right? We all end up in these different bubbles. I'm not surprised at all that they would say domestic violence and stuff would increase.
And that's just a small effect. But these lag effects kind of suggest that one of the things that societies could do, this is a potential policy area. One of the things that we could do at a societal level is start to also track sentiment on social media to try and understand and predict where offline behavior is going to change later. Right? We could track misogyny. We could start to track this incel ideology. We could track people's resentment and disgruntlement about the sexes and use that information to then look at some of these more pernicious crimes and the outcome of those crimes later on, and potentially then divert resources into those areas to try and rectify things.
Ahead of time, almost.
Now, this whole conversation was completely wild to me. How in God's name have we been just altered in our lives to think other things are important, such as video games or porn, and that's what we should be spending our time with, and don't get mad, don't look outside, and don't do these other things, etc., etc. Don't strive harder to achieve. I think this is very eye-opening, and I can see it in myself. I've also struggled with it at different points in my life. Hopefully you all got a lot of value out of that. And on the second piece about domestic violence, that they can track it and that they can potentially get in there before it starts happening, etc. I think that is good. However, I don't like the idea of this whole tracking thing per se. I would rather we keep people healthy in the beginning so they don't even end up in that state. So I'd rather be preventative. And I also don't want this weird kind of police state where we're policing people's thoughts. Well, hopefully you guys like this video and you leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts. As well, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys again next time.